Hengist here from House of Hengist Comics, and a big welcome back to the channel, and a big welcome to our new subscribers too. Today we are in Blitzkrieg, episode 24, Inferno. First, our new segment. Here's our operational map. Hallen is to the north where we're going to be at, but we're about to see parts of Hanau, which is the first huge tank clash between two armoured divisions of French and German forces. The map here indicates Hallen to the bottom left, and we're going to see that more medium and I suppose German heavy armour, Panzer 3s and 4s, moving up, freed from the Ardennes. They are always basically supported by Kratschützen in the van, who have done a fantastic job, but the civilians are beginning to get angry now. They're over the shock and there's resentment building. And we've got casualties also. About 25% of the transport air fleet over Holland has gone down. And we've also going to have a huge number of prisoners that are Belgian and Dutch caught in this confusion as the Kratschützen press, ever pressing forward. So today, let's have a look at the Belgian forces. It's not a heavy force list. They are depleted. They have two platoons of Lancers, which is MG infantry. They're going to be supported in some way by both two anti-tank guns from the bridge that made a really great last stand, and some motorcycle light infantry, but that's it. Other than that, in the deck, we may actually see some Belgian air ferry battles here. Nice picture. Some T-13 tank destroyers and possibly artillery online. Let's now look at the German forces though today. These are the forces that they've picked. Two Kratschützen platoon, excellent veteran quality infantry. They are going to be also supported by possibly some mortars, and also I think they've got Panzer 2s from the bridge, and possibly in deep reserve the Panzer 4s, that fantastic close support tank that moves into a more utilitarian role in France and becomes an actual battle tank, so to speak. We also may see, if we're lucky, Panzer Jaegers. These are deep reserve too, with that wonderful 47mm, probably one of the most powerful guns on any carriage the Germans have at this stage. They've got some specialists, including an energetic officer, dispatch rider, and a medic. So let's get into the research now, and let's take a look at what we've done. Again, as I stress, we found very little on Hallen and Tienen, but this is a great opportunity for me to explore a facet I'm interested in, which is namely fire. And basically smoke and the effects and battles that are fought within these horrific conditions. If you've been near a burning building, it's not a pleasant experience. So there are going to be motivation checks for infantry and vehicles moving close to them, I think within 4 inches we stated. We're also going to see all the problems of smoke and visibility, so we will have probably what we call deep cover in place, so they'll re-roll failed saves. Let's look at the mission and the set now. Hallen here is in the bottom left. It's not there geographically, but that's how I've marked it. And we're also going to see, importantly, these deep reserves which come from the column, the Panzer 3s, the Panzer Jaegers, and the Pioneers. Now their job, inspired heavily by this photograph from Tienen or Hallen, I'm not sure, was to rebuild some damage caused by a bomb crater. And that's a great image there, which was the inspiration behind what I tried to do in this. So what we've got is a Stuka attack, and what I wanted to do was also focus on tasks and dealing with problems like the fires and whether they can be put out, and the civilians and whether they can be shepherded to safety. For the Germans, they've got to get across that 30-meter crater with their tanks and armour and keep the roll barn going. And so as we look at the overall nature of the battlefield, visibility, cover, all of this are going to be even more critical, and also whether troops can maneuver through the fire zones, so to speak, and operate effectively. I've also put in the Belgian lawn tennis club just as a feature, because I wanted to break up the landscape and make it a little bit more interesting, and that will be a victory location for the Belgians only. We can also see crater impact and civilians are a real problem. I've got some naked civilians here, and the reason they're naked is because bombs, generally when they explode, can blow clothes off quite literally. So I want to look at civilians and how they're shepherded around the battlefield, and what the Belgians can do to protect their civilians. In summary, it's going to be a 12-turn game, basically with a task. That is to build the bridge for the Belgians, for the Germans, and the Belgians have just got to basically hold on and try and keep this road closed for 12 turns. So without further ado, let's get into the battle action. And it was a really interesting one. It's our final part. So we open with obviously the Kratschützen moving up, supported by the Panzer IIs. They begin to peel off with their 1IC and dispatch rider moving there. We've got one combat attachment, which is the medic. They're moving with the 1st platoon, and an energetic officer also attached to 1st platoon as well. Really good for re-rolling motivations. Now at the beginning of each turn we have fire tests. On a 1 the fire continues, it may actually spread. On a 6 it is effectively extinguished. As we can see, this happened in the 1st turn. So this fire went out. The Kratschützen on the right van move up to where the Belgians are, and the Belgians open fire using their sort of bicycle infantry and destroy 12 effective soldiers, which puts a lot of concern on the German faces. They start to lose more Kratschützen as they advance, because the Belgians have pushed their 2 platoons forward with 1 in reserve. They start to clear civilians, rolling skill checks, because they get points for this and do this very effectively, but they can't fire and they lose their gun to ground, so it's risky. And we've got the Panzer IVs arrive as well, a great sort of tank to support infantry in these environments. And as we can see on the orchard on the left flank where the energetic officer is, they start to open fire, causing casualties, but fire is taken from them and they lose casualties. Here we can see basically the bicycle command team radioing for support artillery. It really needs it as the Germans basically bring their mortars in and their tanks up, and their tanks are causing a lot of fire. On the right flank, the Kratschützen fall back. They then get a skirmish order card, which they play and isn't joking, and extend the Panzer IV tank radius to 10 inches. We then see an attack now on the Belgians that are holding this orchard. There's one team that's isolated. A lot have been killed in close action already, and through fire, and they defend themselves quite well, effectively knock off another team, but are soon to perish and are to be overrun. The rest of the platoon pushed back. So the Kratschützen start sweeping towards the Belgian lawn tennis club. We get the Panzer IVs moving down that road on their own. Effectively, you can see here there's a barricade at the end where one of the 2 47mm is placed. The Panzer IIs are moving round the flank. They're sending civilians to the rear, whilst the Kratschützen attack into the orchard, and there's a fire behind that orchard. Now, as the Panzer IIs move round, basically one of the 47mm gone into Overwatch. The Belgians fall back into the rubble. The K building starts to basically take some fire and it begins to spread, but then extinguishes as the 3rd Central Platoon breaks half and the 1IC moves it up. The Kratschützen launch an attack, which is quite successful, and it pushes back basically the Belgians. We can see here from this crater, the Panzer IIs have come round the corner, but then Overwatch is called. It's successful. 2 shots ring out. One hits the tank square on and knocks it out, completely blowing it up. The Panzer II commander is shocked as the combat engineers arrive from deep reserve, and they're moving up in trucks. The Panzer IVs now moving forward, supporting the Kratschützen on the right. One of them takes an incoming round. It only stuns the crew, so to speak. You can see the length of the shot here. It was very good shot given the concealment that was down there. And this is a better position of where the 2 guns are. But there's only about 4 teams of infantry supporting that. The Panzer IV here doesn't recover it initially. The other one fires and misses. The Panzer II here, which is burning, the one on the right moves into the rubble. But the Belgians in the orchard, basically, they are effectively destroyed. 4 men surrender. But then we have a problem with the Kratschützen because they fail for the rest of the game to move past the fire. They just can't motivate. As the pioneers move forward to approach the obstacle, the Belgians try and call concealed fire. This is jokered, but counter-jokered by the Belgians. As you can see in a lovely picture, and we see ultimately the Belgian part platoon moving, approach the doctor by the toilet. They are to keep him, but they want the points. We get some changes basically in the conditions as well, but the fires aren't spreading. The Panzer IV recovers, which it does really, really well. and proceeds to open fire along with the mortars. The first time the mortars have really ranged in effectively and blow that 47mm to pieces. That leaves the road open effectively, just the fire breaks and a few teams of infantry. But the fires are keeping the Germans back. And the doctor scurries basically for safety, which is what he had to do. And we then see a desperate attack by the 1IC, launches out. It was a huge gambit. He gets in, takes all the fire, and then completely fails in close assault. Is driven off, fails to counterattack and lose 4 men. But it's delayed the Germans, as we can see that Panzer II hiding. The other Panzer pops out and effectively does really well, as the Panzer IV decides it's going to try and cross the crater. The fires, as you can see, are stabilised, but then the Panzer IV fails its role and crashes into the bottom of the crater where it's immobilised. The poor medic for the Belgians is basically stranded. A number of cards are played. You can see the dice giving the results. But ultimately they aren't significant. Many of the cards aren't. We get a tank rolling across the tennis courts. You can imagine the chairman of the Belgian tennis clubs going absolutely nuts. And what's left of the Belgian park platoon falls back, trying to get to the barricade where it's going to try and make a last stand. We get a card. This time it's a stone wall, so we get a feature as a card. We can now see the pioneers moving down the road to try and clear the crater. Unfortunately, the anti-tank guns fail their motivation and break, pulling out with no guns. The engineers now concentrate on their task. Oh, for artillery. And they manage to basically get the bridge across and start moving that tank back into operational status. Some excellent rolls there. The engineers continue moving forwards. And what we've now got is a real problem, because the Panzerjägers arrive to the Germans' delight, and really, as this image indicates, really they're in total control of the town. The Panzers IIs have pushed through, and we then get basically the sudden arrival basically of the T-13s, only to see morale break by the Belgians, and they extricate themselves along with what's left in a somewhat ignominious retreat. The civilians look absolutely dumbfounded and horrified. Some business, however, goes on as always. You can see the lady of the night there. So it is ultimately a German victory, a narrow one, but an excellent game. So what can we say in postscript? Well, actually, this was really, really interesting. And we really enjoyed the game. Very small again. Lots of detail in there. Lots of challenges for the wargamers playing. And I think we learned a lot. I mean, I think tactically we could have done better in terms of how we used the fires. But as I said, this was very exploratory. And the Kratschützen are really valued. I mean, every time a base goes down, the Allies are really cheered when this occurs. But smoke, visibility, the terror, civilians, all of the problems that can be associated with this type of combat, I think were experienced and played upon. It was a shame we didn't see the tank destroyers arrive. And in Paris, everyone seems perfectly happy, outstanding weather, but the dark storm clouds are coming. Unfortunately, the one man who knows the problem is Gamland, but he is at a loss as to what to do. So when we think of Inferno, I'd also like to recommend Max Hastings' work, which is a great overview of World War II. We've got Major MacDonald, fresh from Norway, he was on the first boat out, eager allegedly to be at the Hun. But can we never forget, guys, and always keep their memory alive through understanding the history. I like this from Anne Frank. How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. I'd like us all to reflect on that. Because this war was a war of abject terror, of real tragedy, of terrible events which happened through our sort of misconduct as human beings. And ultimately, fires and destruction were alas, all too part of the warfare of the time. So this is Blitzkrieg.